Hi, I'm Elizabeth and I'm here to talk about books. Today you're getting something slightly different, just because I am ill and I don't want to be in front of the camera. But today we're doing a book haul, because last weekend I was in London and I filled my suitcase with books and I just wanted to show them off. And that's something I can do without showing you my gross face right now, because I have a terrible cold. When I was at the airport getting ready to get on my plane, and by getting ready I mean getting drunk because I hate flying, I watched a video by Elizabeth over at Booksandpieces where she hauled Rosewater by Tate Thompson. I have to admit, I don't remember what she said that made me want to buy the book. I don't remember much of the video at all, if I'm to be honest. But a few hours later I did find myself in Forbidden Planet, where I saw this book and I bought this book. I don't really know much about it. I know it's a science fiction story set in a near future Nigeria, and more than that, I think I'll have to actually read the book to be able to report back to you. But yeah, that was my first purchase. I also bought another book at Forbidden Planet, and that was Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is also a book on Elizabeth's recommendation. She has been raving about Tchaikovsky this year, not necessarily mostly about this book, but this book does not involve spiders, so this is the one I chose. This is about Rex, who is a good dog, but he's also a biological weapon of mass destruction. But he wants to be a good dog, and being a good dog means obeying your master. But then what when your master is convicted of war crimes, and what happens when the weapon stops obeying the master? This just sounds brilliant and fun and interesting, so I bought that as well. From Forbidden Planet I went on to both Foyles and Waterstones without buying anything, at least on Thursday when I arrived. But I also went to Hatchard's, where I picked up The Ice Palace by the Norwegian writer Tarjei Vesaas. And I am fully capable of reading the original in Norwegian. In fact, I just did. Isslottet by Tarjei Vesaas is a Norwegian modern classic. I absolutely adored the book. But while I was reading it, I was constantly questioning what this would look like in English translation, because I have seen this one popping up in several hauls lately. This is a 2018 release from the Penguin Modern Library edition, and I was just so curious about how the translation would read compared to the original that I ended up buying the translation as well. And I intend to read this fairly soon and make a video comparing the two, if that's something anybody would find interesting. As a matter of fact, I'm probably going to do it, even if nobody says they will find that interesting. So those were the 3 books I bought on Thursday, which was the day I arrived. On Friday I went on another bookshop crawl, because I have recently joined a Norwegian Snapchat channel where we talk about books, and I was hosting that channel for the day, and I took the followers of that channel on a book crawl with me through London. The first shop I went to was Scoob Books, which is one of my favorite bookshops. It's a second-hand bookshop, and the first thing I always do when entering a second-hand bookshop is to see if they have any books by Doris Lessing that I don't previously own. And on this trip the answer was yes. They had The Temptation of Jack Orkney, which is volume 2 of her collected stories. I don't know much about this either, to be honest. It's a short story collection, and I know that the stories in this are all taking place in Europe, because her stories taking place in Africa are collected in 2 other volumes called The African Stories. But I have in fact never read any of Lessing's short stories, just her novels and non-fiction, so I should get on that sooner rather than later, I guess. I also picked up 2 other books at Scoob, and They were both inspired by At the Existentialist Cafe by Sarah Bakewell that I have been reading for Nonfiction November, which is a book about existentialism and about the people connected to existentialism, and the prime people in that movement was Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. And I was curious about reading some of their works, and I thought maybe it would be easier to start with their novels than with their actual philosophy works. So I picked up Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre and The Mandarins by Simone de Beauvoir. And I'm very curious to see how I get on with these books. From there I went on to Persephone Books, which is not far away, and I wasn't planning to picking up anything in that shop, to be honest. I was just going to show it off on the Snap channel. But when I saw this book called It's Hard to Be Hip Over 30 by Judith Viorst, I don't know how you pronounce that name, I just couldn't help myself. I was drawn in by the title. This is in fact a poetry collection, which is something I don't really buy a lot of, and particularly I struggle with reading poetry in English for some reason. But these poems were fairly straightforward. They read almost like prose, and they were kind of sarcastically funny, and I just fell for it when I was browsing, and I couldn't just leave it behind. From there, I went to the British Museum to watch an exhibition about the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. I also visited the museum bookshop without buying anything. But then I went on to London Review of Books, where I picked up another 3 books. So first among those was Speak Memory by Vladimir Nabokov. That was inspired by just having read The Art of Memoir by Mary Karr, where she dedicated an entire chapter to Nabokov's famous memoir. And I have in fact been picking up and putting down this book so many times in bookshops, and I thought this is the time where I stop putting it down and I actually bring it home with me, because I love memoirs, and if this is as good as they say, then I need to read it. I also picked up another book I've been meaning to read for a long time, and that was Outline by Rachel Cusk. This is the first in her trilogy that also includes Transit and Kudos. It's about a writer going to Athens for a writing retreat, and I don't really know much more about it than that, but I've heard people saying things about this book that makes me think it's a book for me. So this is one of the few times where hype is actually working for me, making me want to read the book rather than just making me want to stay away. The last book I picked up there was The Flame Alphabet by Ben Marcus. This is heavily influenced by the lovely booktuber Marc Nash. I'll leave a link to him down below. He was talking about Ben Marcus's newest book recently, and I had never even heard of Ben Marcus prior to that. But he, as in Marc Nash obviously, made me very curious about this author, and I decided to check out his backlist before going to his new book. And this is a novel that sounds just up my street. It's about the speech of children becoming toxic and how that affects the community, and it sounds amazing, and I think this is going to be one of my first reads of December, probably. And that concluded the books I bought on Friday. On Saturday I didn't actually buy any books at all, go me, but come Sunday I couldn't resist anymore, so I went back to the bookshops I had visited without buying anything. First off being Foyles, where I got Goodbye to All That, an autobiography by Robert Graves, another book that was mentioned very flatteringly in The Art of Memoir, so I wanted to read that as well. It's about Robert Graves, who obviously it's an autobiography, but he was a writer and he also fought in the trenches in the World War I, and this is supposed to give a very good description of that experience. I also picked up one Fitzgeraldo edition. It's called Limbo by Dan Fox. I saw this in somebody's Nonfiction November TBR, and I can't remember which one because I've seen so many during October that I can't really tell them apart anymore, but this is a book all about being in limbo, being in transitional phases between things, and it sounded very fascinating, so when I saw it, I picked it up. Then I went back to Waterstones at Piccadilly, where I picked up Milkman by Anna Burns, which everybody should have seen many times, because this was this year's winner of the Man Booker Prize. I am normally not one who follows and read along with a lot of the Man Booker books, but this one spoke to me in some way, because I think this might actually be a book that I will enjoy, so I'm going to give it a go. I also picked up something quite different than that, and that's Cameron Hurley's God's War, which is the first book in a trilogy about a badass bounty hunter that apparently makes Han Solo look like a Boy Scout. I've read the first 2 pages and they really drew me in, so I can't wait to read this. And then the last bookshop I visited was South Kensington Books, because I was staying in South Kensington this trip, and that's another bookshop I really like, and I picked up 3 books, all history books. First being Tudor Church Militant Edward VI and the Protestant Reformation by someone, please help me out here, Diarmaid MacCulloch, maybe? Anyways, I love reading about Tudor history, but I haven't really read much about Edward VI. I've read much more about his very famous father, Henry VIII, and his equally famous sister, Elizabeth I, but I haven't ever read a book dedicated to Edward VI, so I thought this would be a good time to remedy that. I also picked up The Discovery of Middle-earth by Graham Robb, which is a book about the Celts and their beliefs and whatever we know about them, and I thought, well, I don't really know a lot about the Celts, I need to remedy that, so I bought this book to help me along the way. And then finally, my last purchase was also from South Kensington Books, and it's the heaviest of them all. It's probably as heavy as the rest of them about together, and that's the actual exhibition book of I Am Ashurbanipal, King of the World, King of Assyria, edited by Gareth Brereton, and it's published by Thames and Hudson and the British Museum. So this is all about the exhibition I went to, which was great, and if you're at all interested in ancient history, you should go check it out if you have the opportunity. So those were all the books I bought on my trip to London. Right now I live on the probably false assumption that I'm going to read all of these very soon. But, I mean, if history tells me anything, it's that I'm going to read 3 of them and put the rest of them in a pile and forgot they existed because I buy new books. But, hey, let's hope this is the time I'm wrong and I actually read all of them, because I am truly excited to read all of them right now. Until next time, when I will hopefully be feeling well enough to actually show my face, have a nice weekend. Bye bye!